I think all of you have been waiting for a long time. But the topic which we are going to talk about today is the most important part of it. We've been talking about utility, we've been talking about power, we've been talking about various other topics. This is something which is the baseline. In India, utility usually means power, but globally it is acceptable as power, water, oil and gas. All these becomes a part of utility. The major part of any industry in utility is the assets. Usually we've seen that, at least what we have seen is that most of us, we say that, okay, the assets bought are going to run for nearly 10 years, so we should not look at them. But then that's the most important part of it. If we don't look at them, then we cannot handle them. Then there are reliability issues. There are supply chain issues. There are issues which are related to the machine which doesn't work on time and in a proper shape. We've seen that where the most important part is the asset performance and maintenance, which today is becoming digital most of the time. We have a lot of companies who are getting into it. In fact, I saw that DNV is also into major asset management. What do we mean by asset management? Today, the utility industry, right from the machinery which is there, to the security systems, we talked about IoT, we talked about other, but the machinery which actually runs the asset is the large machinery which actually involves transmission, distribution, supply chain management, and other assets which are related to the security of the equipment there. Most of the time when we buy these assets, we get maintenance from the companies who are the OEMs, but then it still requires a regular checkup. There has to be some kind of a logbooks which needs to be maintained. Usually we've seen that the assets which are not managed properly, it runs into, overrun cost. It involves project delays. It is, of course, the short lifespans. Reliability is one of the major issues. We've also seen that at a lot of government, organizations or the regulatory boards penalize these utility companies because of the assets which are not properly maintained and which at times even runs into accidents which could harm both the machine as well as the human beings who are working there. I really believe that there are few things which we need to consider when we talk about asset monetization, asset management, right from the procurement till the end of that machinery which is going to be there as our major platform for providing the services in the service industry. I talk about optimization of these assets. I talk about asset reliability, maintenance cost. If they are maintained and properly managed, naturally the maintenance costs are closer, it is smaller, it doesn't actually overrun. Improve collaboration. That's very, very important because it's a collaborative effort of man and machinery. Major challenges which are there, we need to actually look at them. I have experts from the industry here who have and who understand what is asset management and what is the importance of managing these assets. So I think we can begin with Mr. Vijayan here. Please, if you could throw a few light on what exactly we mean and how important it is for the utility industry.
Thank you. So good morning all. So when we have been talking about 24/7 and the reliable power and the quality of power. So while the focus when we talk about the power availability is more on the network side, how do we monitor the network, the parameters of the loads and things like that, so that the network doesn't overload. So the focus is more on the network operation, and so long it has been like that. But it's also important to understand that what is forming the network. The assets which are on the network, like the transformer, the circuit breakers, the lines, the cables. So all these are forming the network. So if we have to maintain the availability and the reliability of the network, it is important that we have to have the reliable and available assets with us to do the operations of them. And also when we talk about the big networks, so we have heard from CESC, Adani and BSCS, most of the, the utilities, we know that they are large companies managing large number of the kilometers circuits, which means that the number of assets which are going to be there are huge. Not only that in the numbers, but also the the variance of these assets. It can be variance in terms of the age of the assets when they have been installed and commissioned, and the operational conditions, because the old assets may not be necessarily be on a stressful condition, whereas the new assets may be on a stressful condition, where giving a different operational condition of the assets. So not only the the age of the asset, but also the operational condition of the variances in which they are exposed to. And when we talk about the maintenance, the operators on one side who are managing the network, and the asset maintainers who are maintaining the assets. So both have to also collaborate. So when we talk about collaboration, it is not only about the outside world which have to collaborate, but also internally within the organization, also the network operators and the maintainers have to collaborate. Today the collaboration is happening with respect to line clears. Like if we have to plan a shutdown, so I take a line clear where the SCADA operators will give the permission and place a tag on the SCADA system so that the operations are not taking place. So it's not really that collaboration. We will also, maybe when we talk in the next points, we will see how the maintenance systems like the asset performance management can also lead to a synergy between the operators where the asset and operations can be optimized. Not always having a tolerance level of say operating them at 85%, 90% and keeping a 10% gap, because the health of the asset visibility is not there. So we want to be on the safe side so that we don't want to damage it. Because of the non-visibility, we keep a tolerance level, thereby not utilizing the asset, the individual asset as on its own to the best possible usability. When we talk about the condition monitoring, so these challenges are overcome where we have the sensors, we talked about the IoTs and the data. So once the data is available, so just a SCADA system may not be sufficient. We saw the analytics being done on the alarm systems itself. So alarm is just one part of the data type which is there in the SCADA. So if that itself requires an analytics to be done and have it more in an intelligent way of interpreting these alarms. So just imagine the amount of sensor data which will be coming in for all these different types of data, and just the alarm may not be the only visibility that the manager or the operator will be required. The useful information, the health index scoring of these assets, because we are talking about hundreds of assets, even the same type of asset, if you are having say 50, 100 transformers in the network, each of the assets may be placed in a different criteria of the risk and the health assessment. And depending on that, what are the recommended actions? Because when the maintenance crew is going to the field, he doesn't have to open the entire circuit breaker panel or the transformer and then start looking at what the problem is, rather than if the maintenance activities are in his hand. So the optimization of the outages, what we talked about in the earlier keynote sessions, about reducing the outages for the shutdown, planned shutdown. If there's a breakdown, then again the mobilization issues comes in. But when we are planning a reduced outage for a planned shutdown, so it's important to also know what are the activities, where to hit the hammer right, so that we reduce the outage time for a planned shutdown. So these are some of the things which brings in from the asset performance management perspective.
Thank you so much. There's one just question here. Would you see the buyout from? I mean, does the management really want to get into asset, actually management or not? Because we've seen, at least in the Indian scenario, we've seen that, there's not much of buyout. They say we've got the AMC, why should we go for, asset management and, looking at it and creating a logbook, and they don't want to get into it. So, I mean, you being a technology provider and you've been working on the tools which are required for asset management, what is your say on this?
So yeah, whether being in with the AMC with the OEMs or not, I mean, what we have the regime maintenance regime today is periodic maintenance. So whether, as I was talking about, the variance of the assets, whether not only of the age but also the operational conditions and all these things. So whether the maintenance is required or not, because the, the health indexes are not visible, so we just follow a periodic maintenance, carry out a checklist point, go to the asset, each of the asset, and again, if I had to talk about the transformers and the circuit breakers, you have to go to each of the assets and then have the check boxes ticked off, whether it's required or not, whether the maintenance is to be done or not. So today, as I told, the focus has been till now on the network side. We talked about ADMS, which is again a network optimization, system functionalities, which like reducing the outages and having the load flows and things like that. We also have on the transmission side the EMS systems, the energy management systems, again focusing on the network side. So if we have to have those optimization on the network, as I told, network is not independent of the assets. Assets are forming the network. Like, when we say population, population is nothing but we ourselves, each of our individual. So we are forming the population. So similarly, if we have to optimize the network, if we have to create a more operational efficiencies and things like that. So that's why the focus is also now coming on the assets. So the analytics and the things what we saw from CESC and the other name is Nihar. So there is a focus coming in, and it's not only from the top management, it's also from the operators now. So as I told, the asset managers are finding it more difficult because the pressure is on them to also to have the assets available for the operators to operate the network. So it's coming both sides. So that's why we see it's not just a concept like cybersecurity was just a topic of discussion 2-3 years back. Similarly, these technologies were also just concepts and conference topics. But nowadays we see more it's getting into practical approaches and we see implementations being taken up. In some cases, people are trying out on their own, like the utilities want to have their, kind of, so not only just to have the analytics as a topic of, having it for sake, but also to maintain the platforms and then further customize it for the requirement, because these are all changing scenarios. Be the operation or the maintenance, these are changing scenarios. So this needs to be, kept updated and things like that.
Thank you so much. I have Dr. Sinha here. I think we can begin the discussion. I just want to understand how mature is our industry and how, good are they adopting these solutions which are being placed, or these technology and tools which are being placed to them for managing their asset on a long-term basis. So over to you.
Thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon, all. So before starting, I want to just clarify the difference. See, we are all talks about here asset, but see, there is a big part is their equipment, okay? So there are fundamental difference between asset and equipment. It's say all assets are equipment, but all equipment are not asset. Yeah, so because see that asset is already directly linked with your revenue, earning, but equipments are liability basically. If you maintain it, due to you to run the business, okay? There are thousands of equipment. If you come to the across the value chain of, let's say, take the electricity utility, starting from the generation, transmission, and distribution, there are thousands equipments are there. But not necessarily all are asset. Asset, those are actually directly impacting your that your utility business. If I take example for the generation side, let's say unit transformer, it's a transformer, that turbine. If the unit transformer fails in the generation unit, then it is a directly loss of revenue. It is impact your the supplying the power to the grid. So that's the one. If I come to the down the line distribution last point, that CTPT panel, which that recording the reading of the consumer. So if any of the wire, ROIB, any wire the wire fails, it is directly loss of revenue. Only that, say that instead of 100%, you will now require only the 2/3 of that. So that is the directly. So for me, those are the assets, those actually directly impact my revenue. But those are the equipments are there. Like if I said that water treatment plant, coal handling plant, those are the equipments, motor are there. That is not directly impacting my business. If I that the coal crusher unit, it is stopped for 2 hours, it doesn't matter for me, okay? Because it will not impact my power generation. But if I say that pulverizing machine, boiler, those are directly impacting the machine, then I will more concentrate on that. My point want to highlight here that we need to first segregate that which are the equipments and which are the assets. And those are the assets, then there should be special treatment. There need a continuous monitoring. There needs a proactive maintenance, so that we can avoid any kind of failure on against that. Those are effective. Now coming to other perspective, we look into that what are the standard practice adopting that industry from the maintenance point of view. One is that the reactive maintenance. It is called as the breakdown maintenance. Then things come to the preventive or so that scheduled maintenance as per the OEM guideline. Now coming to the predictive maintenance. That's all are the condition-based maintenance based on the vibration, based on the temperature, all these things. Then the proactive maintenance. Proactive maintenance is based on the historical analysis. What are the analysis we have done earlier that this kind of problem may happen? Let's do the proactive maintenance. And last, that very important thing that RCM. Reliability centric maintenance, that is being adopted by most of the aircraft industry. So that is thing being now adopted in the utility industry. It is a mix of preventive, proactive, predictive. Now coming to the adoption on the speaker, if we look into the ground reality, specifically Indian utility scenario, if I say that cost point of view, so it is maintenance cost, not into look into that perspective that it is only the spare parts and that the manpower cost. You have to do the bigger size. So I can take in the component to three parts. One is that cost due to revenue loss. Then there is a operation cost also. It is not directly the revenue. If we look into the continuous process plant, if any equipment fails, let's do the steel industry or any industry, that is a continuous process. If any of the equipment fails, to bring down the entire production line to there, they may require 6 to 8 hours again. So that's basically the loss of the production. Then of course that's the last of the maintenance cost. So point is here that, but if we look into the ground reality, I think this is a thankless job in Indian industry because management is not recognized that maintenance is a job, still it is a support function. It is not a line function. If you go to the any power plant, see that the operation people are the head of that everything. Maintenance people doing that. But because they are only looking into maintenance on the very, very narrow point of view. If I look at that broader point of view, as I told that there are three areas that are responsible for effective maintenance. One is that what are the revenue we are losing. As I'm telling you, if that unit transformer fails, you calculate the revenue, you can understand the importance of maintenance. If anything, say that any asset that fails, that impact is high. For that point of view, it is not that we recognize that importance. That's why adoption of any technology, we are just thinking that it is just it is an additional cost for me, because we are even not thinking about the any system also. We are saying that we have, as you mentioned, that most of the cases now they are going through AMC or sub third party to managing the thing. But see that everything cannot be managed. It is an industry running by 24/7. And someone has to take that accountability to look into the thing in 24/7. But never, it is also observed that outside agency who is involved as an AMC part, they never bothered by 24/7. They always look into their scope of work, and whenever they come, because their economics involved in the scope of work. If they put the additional resource for that, there is additional cost is there. Who will give that cost? That the utility is not agreed to provide the cost. So they are limited their work. Point is that they are not taking that overall accountability to running the thing. So that's the problem. So that's even, again, due to this, there is again a misconception about the management. See that everything is given outsource, why is required the system? The person is managing. So that lot of things are there, but as per my understanding that looking into other thing, lot of things we adopted to upgrade the thing. Lot of things can be automated. No need to that manpower driven, no need to that operation log sheet. We used to fill up by the shift in charge daily because most of the cases, I'm not telling you, but many things there you cannot 100% rely on the data which is coming from the log sheet. Okay, and we all know that how that our operation shift. I not take you respect all these things, but you cannot run the system based on that. Some real-time basis information system has to be there. You have to rely on that, all this kind of IoT, all these things that those are the important equipment to get the data. Analysis system has to be there, but the prioritization has to be done, and based on that prioritization, you have to take care of that equipment to run the day-to-day business. So that's my say from my side. Thank you.
Perfect. I think I really agree to Dr. Sinha on this. That's, I think nearly 5 years back or 4 years back, I was working with an oil and gas company, and they wanted us to look at their asset management. So they said, what is the best cost you can do? I said, let's make a ROI. Because, today maybe you have to spend some money on the IT or on the asset management solutions. but tomorrow you will save more. And it will become more efficient for you than it is today. Because it rightly you said that there is equipment, there is manpower, and there is a machinery. A lot of machinery is just lying like that. It's not being used. So we have to see what is the best way we can actually monetize and work by maintaining these equipment for efficiency of the utility plant running. So that's something which we saw. We have Mr. Amit here, and I'm sure he'll understand more and he'll be able to highlight more on that, because we come from the consulting background and we see that most of the power corporations really don't want to listen to it, and they say, oh, हमारा तो 10 साल का AMC का, we already have 10 years AMC in place. I don't think we should spend much on, asset management. It is not cost, it's not revenue generating. So if anything that doesn't generate revenue, why should we spend money on that? So let's hear it from Amit, what he feels is the current scenario and what is the kind of, response we get from these power corporations or these utility industry when we go to them, both government as well as private. So please, let's hear it from you.
Thanks, Poonam. And since you have already asked me to don my consulting head, so let me see it from a different angle. And Dr. Arup, I cannot agree more to this. Asset is a very misleading term. We generally say asset is the thing which generates the revenue to us. And in a utility perspective, we take everything, every infrastructure, every equipment as an asset, which is quite misleading. And since on the asset maintenance and monitoring thing, I think Nihar has already covered everything in his first session. So let's talk about how the thread which Dr. Arup has started, that how to ensure that asset, or I'll say infrastructure, is better managed. In India, it is required a different mindset. Like in our day-to-day life, how we manage our assets, we take it a highest priority. But we all would agree that in a DISCOM perspective, assets are most underrated, or I'll say not even properly monitored thing for various reasons, which I don't want to highlight on this platform. So the panacea for this perennial problem of the DISCOM could be if we can link the real asset of the DISCOM or distribution utility, transcos, gencos, with the monetization aspect of this, then I see there should be some ray of hope. Because when it will start generating additional revenue or giving a monetizing value, then it would really attract an attention, or I'll say appeal, to manage it in a much more better way. So one of the main point I like to highlight here, the monetization could be a key if we really want to have a much better monitored asset thing. And monitoring an asset for a DISCOM, it is as good as breathing an oxygen. Because like we are having a mantra of power to all, 24/7, and how we are having our monitoring or managing our assets, we are not even looking after on this. We are mostly we are on a reactive mode. We are not even on a predictive mode, or even not taking any data analytic part to take care of this. Like in previous sessions, we have heard that data is oxygen, data is oil. So, and even yesterday, Manu sir made this statement that without data, if you are managing anything or monitoring anything, it is like you are playing in a casino where you are just putting a blind show. So unless and until we are seeing this asset maintenance, monitoring and monetization from a 360-degree perspective, taking all the accounts, all the views in place, then only we can really reach up to a stage where we can say that, yes, we are taking care of our assets, like we generally do take care of assets in our day-to-day life. So Poonam, coming back to your question, in fact, one of the important thing which DISCOMs generally have not taken into account, like in my personal case, if there is an asset, I'll ensure that that asset has a much bigger longevity. But in the discom case, we generally take an infrastructure with a life cycle. There is no any thought process behind this that how I can ensure or we can ensure to get a 10 years or 15 years of a life cycle more to that equipment. Yes, there could be a possible technical, I'll say, limitations behind this, but nobody has thought about this. I would say that if we see on a return of equity or return on investment kind of thing, if we somehow manage to increase the longevity of our asset or our life cycle of manage, say for 5 to 10 years, then certainly that will add up value to or addition to ROI and the ROE thing. And that will really catch an attention not only to the, I'll say, owner of the asset, but also to the regulator and the other stakeholders. So that is also an important point. With this, I'll say, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Hamid. That was really good. But I really believe that processes, technology, tools plays a very important role in asset life cycle, which we really need to take care of. So I think here I would request Mr. Nehar if he could tell me what is his experience, because that's totally private industry into utility. What do you think about the life cycle, asset life cycle when we talk about it, and like right from the procurement till, as we call it, the retirement, or getting the asset thrown away, or how you use it. But then what's your say on it? Because we've been hearing about government, we've been hearing about the utility, because India, we have most of the utility being handled by the government. It's in the recent years that we have people from the private sector who've actually taken over this. So I would really like to hear from you. What do you have to say on whatever we've been talking about? Because I'm sure that most of the things you will not agree, and you'll say, oh, we are following up with all which is being mentioned here. So let's hear it from you.
Okay, an interesting talk. You read my mind. So, and if you ask an hungry guy, would you like to eat? He will also say yes. So if you ask an asset manager that, would you love to have an asset management tool in your team? Yes. But what I see is like this, that none of the utilities today, may it be a state utility board, may it be a central transmission utility, may it be a private utility, none of them would not like to have an asset tool. But the thing is, everyone would like to have a tool which fits their storyline. If you see central transmission utility, they do have an asset management tool. They have an asset management dedicated team. And we all know that Power Grid, NTPC, they have a wealth of experience. If you go to state utilities, JETCO, they have their own transmission asset management tool, which they talk it as TAMS. And like that, I believe every utility have their own digital story and an asset management story. The thing is how the OEM and utilities are going to fix the block. So there is a square block and there is a round circle. So one is a utility, another is an OEM. So how things are going to come together and a solution is going to come. In the previous session also we discussed that the digitalization roadmap for each and every utility is separate. And so is the roadmap for asset management too. It depends on lot of factors, age of assets, digital maturity, and one more important thing which I see is when we are talking on equipments, when you talk about assets, human resource is your major asset. How you are taming them to adapt to the new transformation? Are we really involving them in solution building, or we are pushing a solution? Lot of strategies depend how an asset management can really bloom to and flower, which can give a fragrance of optimization, asset longevity. And another most important thing is, as we were discussing, that when we are talking about asset management, the operation guys, the maintenance guys, and if we now bring in some data scientists, some programmers together, they can at least craft their storyline and they can come to an level through which they can then start appreciating newer solutions that are already there into the market. Second very important aspect is every utility and every OEM also needs to basically understand, because when you talk about asset management is a very big subject that talks about data collection, sanitization, asset health indexing, reliability centered maintenance, FMEA analysis, RCA, CAPA. It also basically talks about workforce management. So it's basically a big subject.
Does the load also, affect it, or is there an impact on the load also?
It's, as I told you, there are system parameters also. Like when you talk about equipments, I would say that today when we are talking about IoT sensors, for a 5 million equipment, if I need to have an IoT sensor which is nearly 3.5 million, it doesn't really make a sense to me until and unless that equipment is feeding a very important nuclear power plant, or it is feeding an important state like Mumbai, okay, which is a major, there it basically makes a sense. So as you rightly mentioned, yes, load, and that is where the importance factor also comes in, and that is how you prioritize your assets as was mentioned by our colleague. So the most important thing is how do the people, practicing engineers, SMEs, they all sit together, understand the digital maturity, understand the gaps, prioritize which are the equipments that they would really like to go for, and that is how we made the sensorization plan. Because when we made the initial plan to sensorize each and every equipment, the capex was really going very high. And it doesn't really make a sense to increase a life of a product which is 35,000 rupees by 10 years by installing a sensor of nearly 3.5 lakh rupees. It doesn't really make a sense. And another more important point, today's challenge on IoT and aspects, what we see today is basically the availability of sensors. Like we saw a distribution transformer having a sensor, but how many distribution utilities can afford that sensor on that distribution transformer? So the cost effectivity, and that is where we always basically try to push, we need to have a solution for the country, from the country. And that is why we see our Honorable Prime Minister pushing the concept of Make in India. I believe that if a lot of localizations is happening, if we are really trying to push an academia connect, IITs and all developing the new solutions, the startups and all, we can have affordability. Affordability leads to scalability and of course the ROI.
Just tell me one thing. This has made me very curious. I just want to understand, because I'm sure you are following processes, everything is being digitized, you're capturing the data, everything is now, in your database. If you have to put another plant, does the entire data help you in actually understanding the asset which is being utilized in this plant and which is being replicated or which is also being established in the other plant? Does it help, because now you've got everything in place, there are processes, data is there, you know exactly which asset or which equipment has durability for how many years, how long will it work? But I'm just thinking about a model where, there'll be a major cost saving because of the data which is already available with you. And on the similar data, you could look at the other assets.
So rightfully pointed out, because when we are talking about our growth journey, it's not only the organic growth, but an inorganic growth also, the M&As. So at that point of time, the data wealth does really help us in order to categorize the risk, in order to really understand the acquisition cost and the liabilities that we have. And we are basically working with a concept of having company in a box. So when we are talking about company in a box, it's not only the people, processes, but also the data aspects and all, which can really be utilized, compared, analyzed, and seen to it that how we can really weigh out the challenges, issues of the upcoming new assets that are going to be integrated, both the M&A assets as well as even the new assets. Because even if you have the new assets in the bathtub curve, you will always have a stabilization period costs that you will have to factor in while you are projecting your revenues.
Correct.
So those kind of things, those kind of knowledge, those kind of data is really helping us to really factor out and see to it that the variance with respect to budget and actual comes out to be as less as 3%.
Thank you so much. Here we would like to hear Mr. Mathur. Let's hear what the government has to say on this, and where are we when we talk about the government utility, because you represent them, so let's hear it out from you that whatever we've been talking about, does it make sense, or we are, way ahead, or maybe, we don't understand it at all. So let's hear it from you.
Thank you, ma'am. Most of the things my colleagues has said, every organization has its own perceptions. So our conclusions and our recommendations are based on our own experience. Some other persons have a different experience. What I see, everything connected to an organization should be treated as an asset. These assets can be, we can classify it, certain are the tangibles and certain are non-tangibles. As sir mentioned, some are equipment, some are, those who can lead to a non-damage to your business can be, go to the non-tangible assets which you cannot directly parameterize. And those you can clearly define that failure of these things and importance of these things can help me in grow my business or damage my business performance, can classified as a tangible assets. So I believe the discussion till now was gone for the tangible assets. As an engineering experience, I would just like to share that there was a time when the procurement and designs were made for the equipment, that their maintenance is to be done till the run to the failure. We buy the equipment, we buy the spares associated with it, store there, and whenever the equipment failed, we took the outages and replaced that. There was a time that was the modality.
Reverse engineering.
Not reverse engineering. If I'm putting a power plant, if I put a transformer, I will buy a spares bushing, I will buy a old TC and put it there. Till the time there is no failure, I will not do anything. There was an initial stage, it's a very initial stage, maybe before my started of the career. The time I started my career, Nihar, and we were doing the engineering, a very similar time frame was there. Then you buy the equipment and buy the spares and keep it, the inventory with you. With the growing scenario of the business, the money, whatever you are putting on the spare and whatever outages, everything is counting a damage to your business. I'm talking particularly the transmission industry. Then the modality has came that you do conditional monitoring, as sir mentioned, that conditional monitoring, you assess the condition. If there is a need for the preventive maintenance, you do the preventive maintenance so that the life cycle of the equipment can be stretched up to the specified life cycle for that equipment. So the run to failure was upgraded to in that manner. Then with the mashed up of grid and improve the electricity demand, the time came you don't get so much outages. So engineering and all needs to be developed certain solutions that your solutions are so frequent that you need not to replace, your outages costs are so low. At that stage, most of the utility have integrated their asset management and engineering. Both are working together. Nowadays, earlier it used to say that we are engineering and we are asset management, they don't talk to each other, but now it's like that we are part of them and they are part of it. It's a feedback mechanism. Everyone is talking about they need a data, but what data is needed and how a data is needed. This is a very prime challenge for a person who is doing engineering and who is doing the basic procurement for the equipment. I can put any sensor and it get any data, but whether that data, whatever is collecting, is any helpful for the person who is doing the asset management, that makes a really sense.
Yeah, so data interpretation
Yes,
is also very
interpretation
important.
and gathering the accurate data. If I am putting a sensor on the transformer at certain location where there is no hotspot, that's no point of that. I have to identify that which point of the equipment needs a particular attention and which point of that equipment is to be addressed. What is the criticality of putting the data collection center? The second thing is the interpretation of the data. Whatever my asset management team needs the data, as a procurement and as an engineering, I have to give them a very clear guideline that this is the band, the data, if you have that in this band, the equipment is very, very fine. If it is exceeding this thing, so this can be a problematic solution. So we have to guide assets, the person who are guiding the assets. Then it comes to the financial based solution. We have to evaluate that if we adopt a certain solution which gives you, I will first give an example. At initial stage, we use oil impregnated bushings for the transformers. And for the years, we analyzed that the major failure of the transformers was due to failure of that bushing. The cost of that bushing was something around 5 to 6 lakhs rupees, if I say for 220 kV voltage class. There was another solution available in the market which was costing around 12 lakhs. It's a resin impregnant bushing, which don't have the oil tracking, so failure probability was very low. At the initial stage, everyone was very reluctant that you are putting so much money. Then we analyzed that the failure of the transformer, the cost of transformer is something around 10 to 15 crores, and a very small equipment, a very small component which is costing 5 to 6 lakhs is leading the failure to that. So we adopted and we changed the transformer bushing, and we adopted resin impregnate bushing. So in such a manner, we do many things that what are the solution which can increase a little bit cost, but increase a significant life of that particular equipment, which is having much higher cost and much higher replacement cost if that equipment is failed. This was the one of the solution. Then the next challenge we faced as a utility was the inventory management. Because whatever you are taking as a spare and as an inventory is a cost to you, and which is a dead asset until and unless you utilize it. Many a time some of the inventory you never utilize and it goes as a scrap. So the design aspect was a very important to the interchangeability. If I have a transformer and all my bushings are interchangeable, if all the circuit breakers are interchangeable with each other, all the isolators are interchangeable, all the transmission insulators are interchangeable. So what I can do, I can take that this is my population, I will take the 10% of the inventory and I will pool amongst these sources. So this strategy has reduces very significant costing and increase the life cycle of the equipment very, very significantly. Then definitely, as my colleagues in the previous session and this session said, the technology is always giving you upgradation. So we also adopted certain technologies. A process bus is coming, so that there was a very well point from the sir that you have to identify that these are equipments which lead less problem and these are the equipment which create more problem. So you have to find the solution to eliminate those elements which can create a problem but lesser one. If you get rid of those equipment, you will definitely put your more focus on the heavy equipment. So we are using the process bus based system where electrical signals are directly converting to the optical signals and the entire mechanism, cables and all being eliminated. So the possibility of failures of those small components which we are normally not bothered, but if that occurs, that can lead to outages will be eliminated. And then there are certain new technologies like drone based conditional monitoring system, hot water spraying system. So these all things are as a power grid utility we are adopting for the asset management and integration. So this thing, one more aspect which leads to improvisation in asset management, the CRC tariff block. Every tariff blocks reduce the O&M cost to the equipment. The tariff whatever you are getting, every gross block next 5 years, initially it used to be 10%, nowadays it is somewhere around 3 to 4%. So that gives a motivation to every utility that you should reduce your O&M cost so that you can get the tariff and you should not exceed whatever you are getting. So these are the major, my believings that can lead to any utility.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mathur. That was really good. And, you know, there's a lot of things which I'm sure we didn't know, and he's come out with them. I think I'd like to end this session by saying that, yes, digitization, processes, technology, tools, all these are the ones which play a very, very important role in asset life cycle management. So any utility industry, not only power, the other also like water, oil and gas, work on this, and with companies who are coming up with both automation tools, who are coming up with various IoT tools and other technologies for management of these assets, play a very, very strong role. And I think there are, what I understood from all of us here, that there is adoption which is happening. As Vijay was also saying, that, you know, we were hearing about cybersecurity, I mean, till last 2 years, but now we see the adoption. And similarly, in the asset management also, we've seen that the adoption is happening very fast, and it really is giving return on investment, which actually encourages the utility industry to go for this. Thank you so much, and thank you so much. It really was very informative and helpful, and I really hope that we can take it forward in a more positive way, both from the technology as well as, the industry as such. Thank you so much.